Hey there, weary travelers of the modern world. Tonight, we're going back to a time when the greatest empire on earth was held together not by grand speeches or golden coins, but by countless forgotten souls standing silent watch on endless stretches of stone. We're talking about the wall guards of ancient Rome, the men who spent their lives staring at nothing, waiting for something that almost never came. Before we begin this quiet journey into the past, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all drifting off to the same gentle stories, scattered across time zones, but united in this moment of calm. If you find these slow, meandering tales through history help you unwind after long days, consider subscribing, not because I need the numbers, but because there's something beautiful about building a community of people who appreciate the forgotten, the overlooked, the beautifully mundane moments that shaped our world. Now settle in, maybe adjust your pillow, pull that blanket a little higher. Tonight, we're not exploring the glorious conquests or dramatic political intrigue you might expect from ancient Rome. Instead, we're stepping into the worn sandals of Marcus Quintus Severus, a wall guard whose greatest enemy wasn't barbarian hordes or political conspirators, but the slow, relentless passage of time itself. Picture, if you will, the year 127 AD Emperor Hadrian rules the vast Roman Empire, and somewhere along the northern frontier, a man stands motionless against the gray morning sky. This is Marcus, and he's been standing in roughly the same spot for the past 6 hours. He'll stand here for 6 more. Tomorrow, he'll do it again, and the day after that, and the day after that. This is the story of what it truly meant to guard the walls of Rome. Not the Hollywood version with dramatic battles and heroic last stands, but the real version, the version where your biggest excitement might be watching a bird land on the same stone it landed on yesterday, where your greatest skill becomes the ability to remain standing when every muscle in your body is screaming for rest. Marcus shifts his weight from his left foot to his right foot. It's a small movement, barely perceptible, but it's the most interesting thing that's happened in the last 2 hours. He's developed a system for this, you see. 30 minutes on the left foot, 30 minutes on the right. Then he allows himself exactly one deep breath, one slow scan of the horizon, and the cycle begins again. The wall beneath his feet is made of local stone, quarried from nearby hills by men whose names no one remembers. Each block was cut by hand, fitted with care, mortared with precision. The Romans built things to last, and this wall has been here for decades. It will be here for decades more, possibly centuries. The wall doesn't care about Marcus's aching feet or his growing hunger. The wall simply exists, stolid and permanent, requiring nothing more than his presence. From his position, Marcus can see exactly what he saw yesterday, and the day before, and every day for the past 3 years since he was assigned to this particular section. To his left, the wall stretches toward a distant watchtower where another guard stands in similar silence. To his right, more wall, more stone, another distant figure maintaining the same endless vigil. Behind him, the empire he protects. Ahead, the territory beyond Roman control, looking remarkably similar to the territory behind him. The morning mist is beginning to lift, revealing the landscape in its familiar detail. There's the cluster of oak trees, their leaves just beginning to show the first hints of autumn color. There's the stream that winds lazily through the valley, reflecting the pale sky. There's the hill where wild sheep sometimes graze, though they're not there this morning. Marcus knows this view better than he knows his own reflection. He could sketch every rock, every tree, every bend in that distant stream with his eyes closed. A light breeze stirs, carrying the scent of wood smoke from the settlement behind the wall. Someone is making breakfast. Marcus's stomach responds with a quiet rumble. But breakfast is still hours away. He's learned to ignore hunger, just as he's learned to ignore the persistent ache in his lower back and the way his spear seems to grow heavier as the hours pass. The spear is regulation issue, of course, standard Roman military equipment, well-made and reliable. Marcus has carried this particular spear for so long that his hand has worn smooth grooves in the wooden shaft. He knows every nick in the blade, every slight bend in the metal point. It's never been used for its intended purpose. In 3 years of guard duty, Marcus has never thrown his spear at an enemy, never thrust it in anger, never even needed to draw it in threat. It's simply part of him now, an extension of his arm, as familiar and unremarkable as his own shadow. The sun climbs higher. burning away the last of the mist, Marcus performs his hourly ritual, a slow, methodical scan of the horizon, left to right, then right to left. He's looking for movement, for anything that doesn't belong, for the slightest change in the familiar pattern of his domain. A trained eye, he's been told, always watching, always ready. What he sees is exactly what he expects to see. Nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. There's the usual collection of small details that make up his world. A hawk circles high overhead, riding the thermal currents with effortless grace. Marcus has been watching this same hawk, or perhaps its relatives, for months now. They follow predictable patterns, these birds. They hunt in the morning, rest during the heat of midday, hunt again in the evening. More reliable than most soldiers, really. A rabbit appears at the edge of the oak grove, nibbles at something near the roots of the largest tree, then disappears again. Marcus doesn't react. Rabbits aren't a threat to the empire. Neither are the occasional deer that wander through his field of vision, or the squirrels that chatter in the trees, or the countless insects that buzz and drone through the warming air. His fellow guard, Gaius, appears around the curve of the wall. This is expected. Gaius makes his rounds every 2 hours, checking on each guard position, ensuring that everyone remains alert and in position. It's a necessary duty, though Marcus sometimes wonders what exactly Gaius expects to find. A guard asleep at his post? A section of wall mysteriously unmanned? After 3 years, these routines have become as predictable as the sunrise. "Morning, Marcus," Gaius calls softly as he approaches. His voice carries easily in the still air. "Morning, Gaius," Marcus replies, not turning his head. His eyes remain fixed on the horizon. This, too, is part of the routine. "Anything to report?" "Nothing to report." "Very good. Carry on." And Gaius continues his patrol, his footsteps fading as he moves toward the next guard position. The entire exchange takes perhaps 30 seconds. It's the longest conversation Marcus will have until evening, when his replacement arrives and they exchange the traditional phrases that mark the changing of the guard. The sun continues its arc across the sky. Marcus feels the warmth on his face, though the autumn air still carries a bite. Soon it will be winter, and standing guard will become an exercise in endurance against the cold. He's done winter duty before, long nights when the wind cuts through even the warmest cloak, when your breath forms clouds in the frigid air, when the very stone of the wall seems to radiate cold up through your feet and into your bones. But that's still weeks away. For now, it's just another mild autumn morning, much like yesterday's mild autumn morning, and tomorrow's will likely be the same. The seasons change, but the essential nature of guard duty remains constant. Stand, watch, wait, repeat. A cloud passes over the sun, casting the landscape into temporary shadow. The temperature drops perceptibly, and Marcus can feel goosebumps rising on his arms beneath his tunic. Then the cloud moves on, the sun returns, and warmth spreads across his skin once more. Even the weather follows predictable patterns here. Morning mist, afternoon warmth, evening cool, night chill, day after day, season after season. Marcus shifts his grip on his spear, flexes his fingers to keep them limber. He's learned to pay attention to these small physical details. A guard with cramped hands or stiff joints is a guard who might react slowly when reaction speed matters. Not that it's likely to matter, not that anything has ever required quick reactions in all his time on this wall, but training is training, and discipline is discipline, and Marcus takes pride in maintaining both. He thinks briefly about his life before the army, a small farm outside Rome, olive trees and grapevines, the smell of fresh bread from his mother's kitchen. It seems like a different world now, though it's only been 5 years since he enlisted. The army has its own rhythm, its own logic, its own way of measuring time, not in harvests or festivals, but in shifts and patrols and the endless succession of days that blend together into months and years. His father had been a soldier too, though he'd served in more exciting times, real campaigns, actual battles, stories worth telling. Marcus's father had fought in Gaul, had seen the great forests of Germania, had marched with legions through lands where Romans had never walked before. When he told his stories, his eyes would light up with memories of adventure and danger and the camaraderie of men facing death together. Marcus has no such stories. His war is against boredom, his enemy is monotony, his greatest victory is simply making it through another day without incident. It's not the kind of military service that inspires songs or earns honors, But it's necessary work. Someone has to watch the walls. Someone has to stand ready even when there's nothing to be ready for. A beetle lands on the stone parapet near Marcus's left hand. It's a common variety, black with small spots, the kind that's everywhere once you start noticing them. The beetle sits motionless for several minutes, as if it too understands the importance of patience and vigilance. Then it spreads its wings and buzzes away, disappearing into the vast indifference of the morning air. Marcus envies the beetle, briefly. It can go wherever it wants, whenever it wants. No duty roster, no assigned position, no requirements to stand perfectly still for hours at a time. Just the simple freedom to move through the world as it chooses. But then he dismisses the thought. Beetles don't protect empires. Beetles don't serve Rome. Beetles don't understand duty or honor or the satisfaction that comes from work well done, even when that work consists mainly of doing nothing at all. The morning stretches on, measured not in dramatic events, but in the subtle progression of light and shadow, in the gradual warming of the air, in the familiar ache building in Marcus's feet and legs. This is his life, and it's exactly as unremarkable as it appears. No hidden adventures, no secret dramas, just the pure, unadorned reality of standing guard on a wall that rarely needs guarding, in service to an empire that takes his sacrifice for granted. And tomorrow he'll do it all again. The afternoon brings its own particular brand of tedium. The sun has climbed to its highest point, casting sharp shadows against the base of the wall. Marcus can feel the heat radiating up from the stone beneath his feet. A welcome change from the morning chill, though he knows that in a few hours he'll be grateful when the temperature begins to drop again. His stomach rumbles more insistently now. The midday meal is still an hour away, but his body has learned to anticipate it with the precision of a sundial. 3 years of the same routine have taught him to read time not by the position of celestial bodies, but by the rhythm of his own hunger, the progression of shadows, the subtle changes in the quality of light that mark each hour's passage. A fly lands on his nose. Marcus doesn't flinch, doesn't swat at it, doesn't even blink. Moving would break his concentration, would disturb the careful balance he's maintained since dawn. The fly explores his face for a few moments, apparently finding nothing of interest, then buzzes away to investigate more promising territory. Such is the extent of Marcus's interaction with the natural world on most days. He's become part of the landscape, as fixed and unremarkable as the stones he stands upon. To his left, he can see Lucius at the next guard position, perhaps 200 paces away. Lucius has been on wall duty even longer than Marcus, nearly 5 years now, and he's achieved something approaching perfect stillness. From this distance, he looks more like a statue than a man, carved from the same stone as the fortification itself. Sometimes Marcus wonders if Lucius has actually died at his post and simply remained upright through sheer habit. But then he'll catch a slight movement, a barely perceptible shift of weight, and know that life persists even in such motionless dedication. The landscape before him shimmers slightly in the heat. The distant hills seem to waver like reflections in disturbed water, creating the illusion of movement where none exists. Marcus has learned not to be fooled by such tricks of light and temperature. His first few months on the wall were filled with false alarms, moments when his inexperienced eye mistook a heat mirage for approaching figures, when shifting shadows became advancing armies in his imagination. Now he knows the difference between real movement and the endless small deceptions that empty landscapes play on watchful eyes. A cloud of gnats hovers near the wall, dancing in the warm air. They rise and fall in complex patterns, following invisible currents and mysterious purposes. Marcus watches them without really seeing them, the way one might watch flames in a fireplace or waves lapping at a shore. It's something to focus on without requiring thought, a gentle distraction that doesn't threaten his vigilance but provides a momentary respite from the vast emptiness of the horizon. His feet have progressed beyond mere aching into something approaching numbness. This is both a blessing and a curse. The pain recedes, but so does sensation, leaving him feeling slightly disconnected from the ground beneath him. He's learned to trust his balance even when he can't fully feel his feet, learned to rely on muscle memory and practice stance to keep him upright and alert. The body adapts to almost anything, given enough time and repetition. The sound of hoofbeats breaks the afternoon silence. Marcus doesn't turn his head, but his attention sharpens immediately. Hoofbeats mean riders, and riders mean something happening, which is unusual enough to warrant careful attention. The sound grows closer, and presently a small group of cavalry appears around the bend in the road that runs parallel to the wall, perhaps half a mile distant. Marcus counts them automatically, 4 riders, moving at an easy pace, not fleeing or pursuing or showing any signs of urgency. Their equipment glints in the sunlight, marking them as Roman forces, probably a routine patrol, or perhaps messengers carrying dispatches between fortifications. They're too far away for Marcus to make out details of rank or unit insignia, but their relaxed posture and steady pace suggest nothing more dramatic than ordinary military business. The riders pass along the road, disappearing behind a copse of trees, and the hoofbeats fade back into silence. The entire event lasts perhaps 3 minutes, but it's the most interesting thing that's happened since dawn. Marcus files it away mentally, knowing that Gaius will ask about it during his next patrol round. 4 Roman cavalry heading east, midday, no apparent urgency. Standard patrol most likely. Nothing to report, but worth noting. The silence that follows seems deeper somehow, as if the brief interruption has made the emptiness more pronounced. Marcus realizes he's been holding his breath slightly, his body unconsciously tensed for action that never came. He releases the tension slowly, allowing his breathing to return to its normal rhythm, his stance to resume its practiced ease. False alarm, or rather, not even an alarm at all, just life proceeding along its predictable channels. A butterfly appears, bright orange with black markings, dancing erratically through the air near the wall. It flutters back and forth, seemingly unable to decide on a direction, pausing occasionally to rest on the warm stones before launching itself into another burst of aimless flight. Marcus finds himself oddly envious of its freedom, its ability to change course on a whim, to explore without purpose or destination. But then the butterfly disappears over the wall, and Marcus is alone again with his duty and his thoughts. The afternoon wears on with the slow inevitability of erosion. Shadows creep across the ground, the sun begins its gradual descent toward the western horizon, and Marcus's body settles deeper into the familiar rhythms of endurance. His back aches, his legs throb, his neck is stiff from maintaining the same position for hours. But these discomforts have become background noise, no more worthy of attention than the whisper of wind through grass or the distant murmur of insects. He thinks about home again, as he often does during these long stretches of inactivity. His mother's voice calling him in for dinner, the smell of olive oil and herbs, the sound of his father sharpening tools in the evening light. Simple pleasures that seemed ordinary at the time but now glow with the warm patina of memory. He wonders what his family is doing at this moment, whether they think of him standing here on this wall, whether they understand that his boring, uneventful service is a kind of gift to them, a guarantee that their peaceful lives can continue undisturbed. The empire is vast beyond imagining, stretching from the cold forests of Britain to the burning deserts of Africa, from the Atlantic shores to the mountains of Armenia. Millions of people live their lives within its borders, farming and trading and raising children and growing old, most of them never thinking about the walls that protect them or the men who stand guard upon those walls. Marcus is one of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of soldiers whose daily sacrifice is precisely this: the willingness to be bored, to endure tedium, to stand ready for events that rarely come. It's not glorious work. There are no songs about wall guards, no statues erected in their honor, no celebrations of their service. They are the forgotten defenders, the invisible shield, the men whose greatest achievement is the absence of excitement. But empires are not built only on dramatic conquests and brilliant strategies. They're sustained by the quiet dedication of ordinary people doing unremarkable jobs with steady persistence, day after day, year after year. A raven lands on the parapet 20 feet to Marcus's right. It's a large bird, glossy black feathers gleaming in the afternoon sun, intelligent eyes scanning the area with professional interest. Ravens are common here, drawn by the occasional scraps from the guards' meals and the small animal carcasses that accumulate near any human settlement. This one seems particularly bold, hopping closer along the wall, cocking its head to study Marcus with curious attention. Marcus and the raven regard each other for several minutes, 2 sentinels sharing the same duty in their different ways. The bird is watching too, after its fashion, alert to opportunities and threats, ready to sound an alarm if necessary. Perhaps they understand each other, Marcus thinks. Perhaps the raven knows something about the weight of vigilance, the cost of constant attention, the way time moves differently when you're waiting for something that might never come. The raven croaks once, a harsh sound that echoes off the stone walls, then spreads its wings and lifts away into the blue afternoon sky. Marcus watches it go, following its flight until it becomes a black dot against the distant hills, then disappears entirely. He's alone again, as he knew he would be, as he always is during these long hours of duty. His replacement will arrive in perhaps 3 hours, though time moves strangely on the wall, sometimes crawling with agonizing slowness, sometimes seeming to skip forward in unexpected jumps. The changing of the guard is the closest thing to excitement that most days provide. A few words of ritual exchange, a brief summary of the day's non-events, the blessed relief of stepping down from his position and walking away from the wall, however temporarily. But that's still hours away. For now, there's only the familiar weight of his spear, the steady ache in his feet, the endless vista of empty landscape stretching away toward the horizon. The afternoon light is beginning to take on the golden quality that signals the day's slow progression toward evening, but the sun still has far to travel before it touches the western hills. Marcus shifts his weight again, left foot to right foot, the movement so subtle that a casual observer might miss it entirely. It's a small rebellion against the stone stillness required of his position, a tiny assertion of life and humanity in the face of duty's demands. He allows himself this brief moment of motion, then settles back into his vigil, eyes fixed on the familiar emptiness before him, mind alert for any change in the pattern of sameness that defines his world. The wall stretches away in both directions, an endless line of carefully fitted stones that has stood here longer than Marcus has been alive and will stand here long after he's gone. Other men will take his place, will learn the same lessons about patience and endurance, will discover their own ways of marking time and managing discomfort. The duty continues, passed from guard to guard like a sacred trust, each man adding his own small contribution to the great work of watching and waiting. A gentle breeze stirs the grass in the valley below, creating patterns of movement that ripple across the landscape like waves on a green sea. Marcus watches the grass bend and sway, follows the invisible currents of air as they sculpt temporary artworks from living vegetation. It's beautiful in its way, this dance of wind and plant life, this constant, subtle motion that never quite repeats itself but never truly changes either. The beauty doesn't make his feet hurt less, doesn't ease the stiffness in his shoulders or reduce the tedium of his position, but it provides something to contemplate during the long hours of enforced stillness. Marcus has learned to find interest in small things, to appreciate details that would have escaped his notice in his previous life, the way shadows change throughout the day, the subtle variations in bird calls, the endless small dramas of insect life playing out among the stones of the wall. A line of ants marches along the base of the parapet, each insect carrying something in its mandibles, following an invisible trail laid down by their scouts. They move with purpose and determination, these tiny creatures, their mission as important to them as Marcus's duty is to him. There's something admirable about their persistence, their willingness to work together toward goals that may take days or weeks to achieve. They don't complain about the weight of their burdens or the length of their journey. They simply continue, step by step, until the work is done. Marcus envies them sometimes, these ants with their clear objectives and measurable progress. His own work is harder to quantify. How do you measure the value of nothing happening? How do you take pride in the absence of events? Success, for a wall guard, is the most invisible kind of victory, the triumph of deterrence over action, of peace over conflict. It's work that matters precisely because it appears not to matter at all. The sun continues its journey across the sky, and Marcus continues his own journey through the hours, one breath at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one small shift of weight at a time. The afternoon moves toward evening with the same relentless patience that characterizes everything about his duty. There's no rushing it, no shortcuts, no way to make time pass faster than it chooses to pass. There's only the steady accumulation of moments, each one exactly like the last, each one bringing him slightly closer to the end of his shift. His stomach growls with increasing insistence now, a low rumble that seems to echo off the stone walls around him. The midday meal approaches, and Marcus has learned to anticipate it with the precision of a sundial. Not because the food is particularly appetizing, mind you, but because it represents one of the few punctuation marks in an otherwise endless sentence of standing and watching. The guard's rations are simple fare, coarse bread, often day-old and hard enough to chip a tooth if you're not careful. A portion of lentils or beans, sometimes flavored with a bit of salt pork if the supply wagons have been generous. Watered wine that tastes more like vinegar than anything resembling the good vintages they serve in Rome. It's fuel, nothing more, designed to keep a man upright and alert rather than to provide any sort of culinary pleasure. Marcus has grown accustomed to eating while standing, balancing his wooden bowl in one hand while keeping his spear ready in the other. The art of consuming lukewarm lentils without taking your eyes off the horizon is one they don't teach in basic training, but every wall guard masters it eventually. You learn to chew slowly, to make the meal last as long as possible, because once it's finished, there's nothing but more waiting until the evening's equally uninspiring repast. A horsefly buzzes around his head, drawn perhaps by the salt residue from his morning sweat. It circles him with lazy persistence, occasionally diving in close enough that Marcus can hear the drone of its wings. He doesn't swat at it. Such movement would be undisciplined, a break in the careful composure that's expected of a Roman guard. Instead, he simply endures its presence, adding the fly to the long list of minor irritations that comprise his daily existence. The fly eventually loses interest and moves on to investigate the stone blocks of the wall itself, searching for whatever mysterious attractions draw insects to sun-warmed limestone. Marcus watches it go with the same detached attention he brings to everything else in his field of vision. 3 years of guard duty have taught him to notice everything while reacting to nothing, to maintain awareness without allowing that awareness to disturb his essential stillness. To his right, the wall curves slightly as it follows the natural contours of the landscape. From his position, Marcus can see perhaps half a mile in either direction before the fortification disappears around gentle hills or behind stands of trees. It's an impressive piece of engineering, this wall, built to last centuries and probably capable of doing exactly that. Each stone has been cut to fit precisely with its neighbors, creating a barrier that seems to grow from the earth itself rather than being imposed upon it. The Romans are good at building things, roads that run straight as spear shafts across hundreds of miles of varied terrain, aqueducts that carry fresh water from distant mountains to sprawling cities. Walls like this one that mark the boundaries between civilization and whatever lies beyond. Marcus takes a certain pride in being part of this grand enterprise, even if his contribution consists mainly of standing very still for very long periods of time. A moth flutters past, pale gray wings catching the afternoon light. It moves with the erratic unpredictability that characterizes its kind, zigging and zagging through the air without apparent purpose or destination. Marcus follows its flight with his eyes, grateful for anything that breaks the visual monotony of his watch. The moth circles the wall twice, bumps gently against the stone parapet, then disappears over the ramparts toward the territory beyond Roman control. He wonders briefly what the moth will find out there. More of the same landscape, probably, the same hills and streams and patches of forest, the same birds and animals and insects living their lives according to patterns established long before Romans ever set foot in this region. The wall divides the world into two sides, Roman and not Roman, but nature doesn't recognize such distinctions. A tree is a tree whether it grows within the empire or beyond it. The sun climbs higher and the heat begins to build in earnest. Marcus can feel sweat forming beneath his helmet, trickling slowly down his neck and under the collar of his tunic. The metal of his spear point grows warm to the touch, and the leather wrapping on the shaft becomes slightly sticky with moisture from his palm. Summer duty is particularly challenging when the sun beats down mercilessly on guards who cannot seek shade or remove their equipment or do anything but endure hour after hour of baking heat. But today is merely warm, not unbearable. The autumn air still carries enough coolness to make the sunshine pleasant rather than oppressive. In a few weeks, when winter sets in properly, Marcus will look back on days like this with something approaching nostalgia. Standing guard in a snowstorm when the wind cuts through even the heaviest cloak and ice forms on your eyebrows and beard makes a man appreciate the simple luxury of moderate weather. A distant sound catches his attention. Voices carried on the breeze from somewhere behind the wall. probably workers in the settlement going about their daily business of maintaining the infrastructure that supports the frontier garrison. Blacksmiths hammering iron, carpenters sawing wood, cooks preparing the midday meal that Marcus will soon receive. The sounds of civilization, of people living normal lives protected by walls and guards, and the vast machinery of Roman military organization. Marcus envies them sometimes, these civilians with their varied tasks and social interactions. A blacksmith shapes different pieces throughout the day, solves different problems, sees the tangible results of his labor in the form of horseshoes and tools and weapons. A carpenter builds things that didn't exist before, creates useful objects from raw materials through skill and effort. Even a cook has variety in his work, different ingredients to combine, different flavors to achieve. But then Marcus reminds himself that their safety depends on his vigilance, that their freedom to pursue ordinary occupations exists only because he and thousands like him are willing to stand watch on walls and guard posts throughout the empire. It's a trade-off. His excitement for their security, his adventure for their peace. Not a bad bargain, really, when you consider the alternatives. A spider has constructed an elaborate web in the corner where two sections of stone meet. Marcus notices it during one of his periodic scans of his immediate surroundings, a delicate construction of silk that trembles slightly in the breeze. The spider sits motionless at the center of its creation, waiting with the same patience that Marcus has learned to cultivate. They're both in the business of watching and waiting, guard and spider, though the spider's vigil will be rewarded with trapped insects, while Marcus hopes his will never be rewarded at all. The web is actually quite beautiful, Marcus realizes, an intricate pattern of radial threads and spirals, engineered with mathematical precision despite being created by a creature with a brain no larger than a grain of sand. There's something admirable about the spider's dedication to its craft, the way it builds the same type of web over and over again, each one perfect in its own way, each one serving its intended purpose without need for innovation or variety. A leaf falls from one of the distant oak trees, spinning slowly as it drifts toward the ground. It's still early in the season for falling leaves, but there are always a few that give up their grip prematurely. Tired perhaps of hanging on through the summer heat and ready to surrender to the inevitable pull of gravity, Marcus watches its descent, following the lazy spiral path until it disappears into the grass below. The sight reminds him that time is passing, that seasons change even when individual days seem frozen in endless repetition. This autumn will become winter, winter will yield to spring, spring will warm into summer, and the cycle will begin again. Marcus will likely be here for all of it, watching the same landscape transform through its annual progression of colors and temperatures and weather patterns. He's become part of the rhythm of this place, as reliable as the sunrise, as predictable as the changing seasons. His replacement, when it comes, won't be for months or possibly years. Guards are assigned to their positions for extended periods, partly for efficiency and partly because familiarity with a particular section of wall makes them more effective at their job. Marcus knows every stone in his section, every crack and stain and weathered edge. He knows how the light falls at different times of day, how shadows move across the landscape, how the wind sounds when it blows from different directions. A new guard would need time to develop this intimacy with the position, time to learn the normal patterns so he could recognize anything abnormal. It's more complex than it appears, this business of standing and watching. The untrained eye sees emptiness where the experienced guard sees a rich tapestry of small details, any one of which might suddenly become significant. Marcus shifts his grip on his spear, flexes his fingers to maintain circulation. The weapon has become an extension of his body, as familiar as his own arm. He knows its balance point precisely, knows how it feels in his hand when he's alert, and how it feels when fatigue begins to set in. The spear is his primary tool, but it's also his companion, the one constant presence that accompanies him through every shift, every season, every long hour of duty. The iron point catches the sunlight, throwing a small, bright reflection onto the stone at his feet. Marcus has polished that point countless times, keeping it sharp and clean according to regulations, though he's never actually used it for anything more threatening than dispatching the occasional snake that ventures too close to his position. Still, discipline is discipline, and a dull spear is the mark of a careless soldier, regardless of whether that spear ever sees combat. A grasshopper lands on the parapet near his left hand, its green body perfectly camouflaged against the moss that grows in the mortar joints between stones. The insect sits perfectly still, apparently as comfortable with motionlessness as Marcus himself has become. They regard each other briefly, two creatures bound by the necessity of patience, before the grasshopper springs away in a single powerful leap that carries it well beyond the wall. Marcus envies that leap, that sudden burst of motion after stillness, that ability to simply decide to be elsewhere and make it happen. But grasshoppers don't guard walls or protect empires or serve causes larger than their immediate survival. They have freedom of movement, but no higher purpose, no sense of duty or service or the satisfaction that comes from work well done. It's a trade-off, Marcus supposes. Freedom for meaning, mobility for responsibility. The afternoon heat continues to build, though it remains well within tolerable limits. Marcus has learned to appreciate the way warmth loosens stiff muscles and eases the persistent ache in his joints that comes from standing in the same position for hours at a time. The sun on his back is almost comforting now, a gentle pressure that reminds him he's alive and functioning despite the static nature of his duty. A cloud passes overhead, casting a brief shadow across the landscape. The temperature drops noticeably, and Marcus can feel the difference on his exposed skin. Then the cloud moves on, the sun returns, and warmth spreads across the wall once more. These small variations in light and temperature provide a kind of punctuation to the day, markers that help divide the long hours into manageable segments. Marcus has developed an internal clock that runs with remarkable accuracy, calibrated by thousands of hours of standing watch. He can estimate the time within minutes just by reading the quality of light, the angle of shadows, the subtle changes in temperature that mark each hour's passage. It's a skill that serves no purpose beyond his current assignment, but he's oddly proud of it nonetheless. The distant hills shimmer slightly in the heat, creating the illusion of movement where none exists. Marcus has learned not to be fooled by such optical tricks, though they still catch his attention briefly before his trained eye dismisses them as harmless distortions. The landscape plays these games constantly, especially during the warmer parts of the day, but Marcus has developed an eye for distinguishing between real movement and the countless false alarms that empty terrain can generate. A bee drones past, heavy with pollen from whatever flowers it's been visiting. The sound of its wings creates a brief interruption in the pervasive silence, then fades as the insect continues on its purposeful journey. Marcus wonders where it's going, what hive or nest awaits its return, whether it will make this same trip tomorrow and the day after that. There's something enviable about having such a clear mission, such obvious productivity to show for one's efforts. His own productivity is harder to measure. How do you quantify successful boredom? How do you demonstrate the value of nothing happening? Marcus's achievements exist in negative space, in the absence of events rather than their presence. He succeeds every day that the wall remains unbreached, every hour that passes without incident, every moment that the empire's borders remain secure. The sun reaches its zenith, casting short, sharp shadows directly below every object. Marcus can feel the heat radiating up from the stone beneath his feet, warmth that penetrates through the soles of his sandals and into his bones. It's not unpleasant, this gentle warming from below, though he knows that in a few hours he'll be grateful when the temperature begins to moderate. A dragonfly appears, iridescent wings catching the light as it hovers near the wall. It darts back and forth with mechanical precision, hunting insects too small for Marcus to see. The dragonfly's movements are quick and purposeful, each change of direction serving a specific function in its ongoing campaign against gnats and mosquitoes. Marcus watches its aerial maneuvers with something approaching admiration. Here's a creature that knows exactly what it's doing and does it with remarkable efficiency. The midday meal arrives at last, carried by a young soldier who makes the rounds to all the guard positions. The food is exactly what Marcus expected: coarse bread, lentil porridge, and watered wine that tastes like it was mixed with vinegar. He accepts his portion gratefully, not because it's appetizing, but because it represents a brief change in routine, a few minutes of different activity in an otherwise unchanging day. He eats slowly, methodically, keeping his eyes on the horizon while he chews. The bread requires considerable effort to break down, and the lentils have the consistency of wet sand, but Marcus has long since stopped expecting pleasure from his meals. Food is fuel, nothing more, designed to keep him upright and alert rather than to provide any sort of culinary satisfaction. The young soldier who delivered the meal lingers for a moment, perhaps hoping for conversation, but Marcus maintains his professional silence. Talking while on duty is discouraged, and besides, what would they discuss? The weather is predictably mild, the landscape predictably empty, the duty predictably boring. Better to save words for evening, when guards gather around cook fires and share the small events that comprise their lives. A butterfly lands on the rim of his food bowl, delicate orange wings closing and opening slowly as it tests the air with thread-like antennae. Marcus doesn't shoo it away. The butterfly isn't interfering with his meal or his duties, and its presence provides a brief moment of beauty in an otherwise utilitarian day. After a few seconds, it lifts away and disappears over the wall, carrying its splash of color into the neutral landscape beyond. The afternoon stretches ahead like an endless corridor, each hour identical to the last, each minute measured out in the slow rhythm of breathing and heartbeat and the subtle shift of shadows across stone. Marcus settles back into his vigil, food finished, duty resumed, the familiar weight of his spear balanced in his practiced grip. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and falls silent. The sound carries clearly in the still air, then fades into memory. Marcus files it away automatically, another small data point in his ongoing catalog of normal sounds and sights. A barking dog suggests human habitation, probably the settlement behind the wall, certainly nothing that requires his attention or concern. The wall stretches away in both directions, an endless line of carefully fitted stones that disappears into the haze of distance. Other guards stand at their own positions, maintaining their own vigils, each man alone with his section of wall and his portion of empire to protect. They're connected by shared duty and common purpose, but separated by the essential solitude that defines their work. Marcus adjusts his stance slightly, redistributing his weight to ease the growing ache in his lower back. It's a small movement, barely perceptible, but it helps prevent the stiffness that comes from maintaining the same position for hours at a time. He's learned to make these micro adjustments throughout the day, tiny accommodations that allow his body to endure the static demands of guard duty. A hawk circles high overhead, riding the thermal currents with effortless grace. Marcus has been watching this same hawk, or others like it, for months now. They follow predictable patterns, hunting in the morning when small animals are active, resting during the heat of midday, making another hunting flight in the evening as temperatures cool. More reliable than most soldiers, really. The afternoon heat continues to build, though it remains within comfortable limits. Marcus can feel sweat beginning to form beneath his helmet. a familiar sensation that signals the day's progression toward its warmest hours. In another month or two, when winter arrives in earnest, he'll look back on this gentle warmth with something approaching nostalgia. A line of ants marches along the base of the wall, each insect carrying something in its mandibles, following an invisible trail laid down by their scouts. They move with determination and purpose, these tiny creatures, their collective mission as important to them as Marcus's duty is to him. There's something admirable about their persistence, their willingness to work together toward goals that may take days or weeks to achieve. The sun continues its arc across the sky, and Marcus continues his own journey through the hours, one breath at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one small shift of weight at a time. The afternoon moves toward evening with the same relentless patience that characterizes everything about his duty. There's no rushing it, no shortcuts, no way to make time pass faster than it chooses to pass. His feet have progressed beyond mere discomfort into a state of persistent, low-level pain that he's learned to ignore. The leather of his sandals has molded itself to his feet over months of wear, creating a fit that's both intimate and uncomfortable. But comfort was never the point of military equipment. Function matters, durability matters, but personal comfort is a luxury that soldiers learn to live without. A cloud passes over the sun, bringing momentary relief from the heat and casting the landscape into temporary shadow. Marcus can feel the temperature drop immediately, a reminder of how much difference a small change in conditions can make. Then the cloud moves on, sunlight returns, and the familiar warmth spreads across his shoulders once more. The rhythms of his duty have become as natural as breathing, as automatic as the beating of his heart. Stand, watch, wait, endure. The same cycle repeated hour after hour, day after day, with only the smallest variations to mark the passage of time. It's not the kind of life that inspires songs or stories, but it's necessary work, the quiet foundation upon which more dramatic events can unfold. A beetle scuttles across the stone near Marcus's left boot, its tiny legs clicking against the limestone with sounds so faint they're almost imaginary. He watches its progress without moving his head, following its path as it navigates around small pebbles and bits of mortar that have worked loose from the joints between blocks. The beetle pauses occasionally, antennae waving as it tests the air, then continues its mysterious journey along the base of the wall. Marcus wonders where the beetle is going, what urgent business drives it forward with such determination. Perhaps it's searching for food or a mate, or simply following chemical trails left by others of its kind. There's something almost admirable about its persistence, the way it continues despite obstacles that must seem mountainous from its perspective. A small pebble that Marcus could flick away with his finger represents a significant challenge to a creature no larger than his thumbnail. The afternoon heat settles over the wall like a heavy blanket, pressing down on everything with gentle but insistent weight. Marcus can feel his tunic growing damp with perspiration, the fabric clinging slightly to his skin beneath his leather armor. The metal studs on his chest piece grow warm to the touch, heated by the sun until they become small furnaces against his body. A grasshopper lands on the stone parapet 3 feet to his right, its powerful hind legs folded beneath its green body like coiled springs. It sits motionless for several minutes, apparently as comfortable with stillness as Marcus has become. Perhaps it understands something about the value of patience, the wisdom of waiting and watching before committing to action. Then, without warning, it launches itself into the air with a single explosive leap that carries it well beyond the wall and out of sight. Marcus envies that moment of sudden motion, that burst of energy after prolonged stillness. His own movements are restricted by duty and discipline, confined to the smallest possible adjustments of weight and position. He cannot leap, cannot run, cannot even walk more than a few steps in any direction without abandoning his post. The grasshopper's freedom seems almost magical by comparison. The sound of hammering drifts over the wall from the settlement behind him, probably a blacksmith working at his forge, shaping iron into useful tools or weapons. The rhythm is steady and purposeful, each blow calculated to achieve a specific result. Marcus finds the sound oddly comforting, a reminder that productive work continues even while he stands motionless on the wall. His stomach reminds him that the midday meal is still an hour away, though his body has learned to anticipate it with remarkable precision. 3 years of the same routine have calibrated his internal clock to military standards, marking time not by sundials or water clocks, but by the steady progression of hunger and fatigue and the subtle changes in light that accompany each hour's passage. A moth flutters past, pale wings catching the afternoon sun as it moves with the characteristic erratic flight pattern of its kind. It circles the wall twice, bumps gently against the warm stone, then disappears toward the territory beyond Roman control. Marcus follows its flight with his eyes until it vanishes into the general haze of distance, grateful for anything that provides even momentary visual interest. The landscape before him shimmers slightly in the heat, creating false impressions of movement that his trained eye automatically dismisses. During his first months on the wall, such optical illusions had caused him considerable anxiety, triggering alerts that proved to be nothing more than tricks of light and temperature. Now he knows the difference between real motion and the countless deceptions that empty terrain can produce. A spider emerges from a crack between 2 stone blocks, testing the air with delicate legs. Before committing to venture onto the sun-warmed surface of the wall, it moves with careful deliberation, each step planned and executed with precision. Marcus watches its progress, admiring the creature's cautious approach to navigation. In a world where a single misstep could mean falling into a gap between stones, such care seems entirely reasonable. The spider pauses near a small accumulation of dust and debris, perhaps investigating scents or vibrations that indicate the presence of prey. After a moment, it continues its journey, disappearing around the curve of a stone block where the shadow provides relief from the direct sunlight. Marcus wonders if the spider has a destination in mind or if it's simply exploring, driven by instincts older than Rome itself. His feet have progressed through discomfort into a state of persistent numbness that makes him feel slightly disconnected from the ground beneath him. The sensation is both blessing and curse, reducing pain but also diminishing the feedback that helps him maintain perfect balance. He's learned to trust muscle memory and practice stance when sensation fails, relying on thousands of hours of training to keep him upright and alert. A gentle breeze stirs the grass in the valley below, creating patterns of movement that ripple across the landscape like waves on a green sea. The sight is oddly hypnotic, this dance of wind and vegetation, this constant subtle motion that never quite repeats itself but never truly changes either. Marcus allows himself to watch the grass bend and sway, following the invisible currents as they sculpt temporary artworks from living matter. The beauty of it doesn't reduce the ache in his shoulders or make time pass more quickly, but it provides something to contemplate during the long hours of enforced stillness. Marcus has learned to find interest in small things, to appreciate details that would have escaped his notice in his previous life. The way clouds cast moving shadows across distant hills, the subtle variations in bird songs, the endless small dramas of insect life playing out among the stones. A horsefly buzzes around his head with lazy persistence, drawn perhaps by the salt residue from his morning's exertion. It circles him repeatedly, occasionally diving close enough that he can hear the drone of its wings clearly. Marcus doesn't swat at it or make any movement to discourage its attention. Such actions would be undisciplined, a break in the careful composure expected of a Roman guard. The fly eventually loses interest and moves on to investigate other possibilities, perhaps the wooden shaft of his spear or the leather fittings of his equipment. Marcus watches it go with the same detached attention he brings to everything else in his environment. 3 years of guard duty have taught him to notice everything while reacting to nothing, to maintain awareness without allowing that awareness to disturb his essential stillness. To his left, he can see Gaius making his afternoon round, checking on each guard position with the methodical thoroughness that characterizes all his duties. Gaius has been a soldier for more than a decade, and his movements carry the economy of motion that comes from years of practice. No wasted steps, no unnecessary gestures, just the efficient completion of required tasks. The sight of Gaius approaching triggers a small surge of anticipation in Marcus, not because he expects conversation or news, but simply because human contact provides a brief interruption in the otherwise unbroken solitude of his watch. Even the most minimal social interaction feels significant when it occurs so rarely, like finding fresh water after hours of thirst. "Afternoon, Marcus," Gaius calls softly as he draws near, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "Afternoon, Gaius," Marcus replies without turning his head, maintaining his focus on the horizon ahead. "Anything to report?" "Nothing to report. 4 Roman cavalry passed on the eastern road around midday, heading south at normal pace." "Very good. Carry on." And Gaius continues his patrol, footsteps fading as he moves toward the next position. The entire exchange lasts perhaps 40 seconds, but it represents the longest conversation Marcus will have until evening when his replacement arrives. He files away the brief interaction, storing it with the other small events that help mark the passage of another unremarkable day. A raven lands on the wall, perhaps 50 paces away, its black feathers gleaming in the afternoon sun. The bird is large and well-fed, probably sustained by scraps from the settlement and the occasional small carcasses that accumulate near any human habitation. It hops along the parapet with confident steps, head cocking this way and that as it surveys its domain with intelligent eyes. Ravens are clever birds, Marcus knows, capable of solving problems and remembering faces. This one seems particularly bold, approaching closer than most wild creatures dare. Perhaps it's grown accustomed to the guards, learning that these motionless figures pose no threat despite their weapons and armor. Or perhaps it recognizes a fellow sentinel, another creature whose job involves watching and waiting. The raven croaks once, a harsh sound that echoes off the stone walls, then spreads its wings and lifts into the blue afternoon sky. Marcus follows its flight until it becomes a black dot against the distant hills, then vanishes entirely into the haze of heat and distance. He's alone again, as he knew he would be, as he always is during these long stretches of duty. A line of ants has discovered something interesting near the base of the wall, probably food scraps dropped by a previous guard or crumbs from his own morning meal. They move in their characteristic single file, each insect following precisely in the footsteps of the one before it. creating an invisible highway that will persist until the food source is exhausted or weather disrupts their chemical trail. Marcus watches their organized activity with something approaching envy. The ants have clear objectives and measurable progress, tangible results they can point to at the end of their working day. They build things, transport things, accomplish visible tasks that contribute to the welfare of their community. His own contributions are harder to quantify, existing in negative space rather than positive achievement. The sun continues its journey across the sky, casting shadows that grow longer and more angular as the afternoon progresses. Marcus has learned to read time by these shadows, using them as a kind of sundial that marks each hour's passage with reliable precision. The skill serves no purpose beyond his current assignment, but he takes quiet pride in this hard-won ability to navigate time without mechanical aids. A butterfly appears, bright yellow with black spots, dancing through the air near the wall with the characteristic unpredictability of its kind. It flutters back and forth, unable to decide on a direction, pausing occasionally to rest on sun-warmed stones before launching into another burst of seemingly aimless flight. Marcus finds himself following its erratic path, grateful for any movement that breaks the visual monotony of his watch. The butterfly eventually settles on a small wildflower that has managed to take root in a crack between stones, probably deposited there by wind or bird droppings. The tiny plant has somehow found enough soil and moisture to survive in this unlikely location, its delicate yellow petals a splash of color against the gray limestone. Together, flower and butterfly create a small tableau of natural beauty that seems almost deliberate in its composition. A cloud passes overhead, casting the wall into temporary shadow and bringing immediate relief from the building heat. Marcus can feel the temperature drop noticeably, a reminder of how much difference small changes in conditions can make to human comfort. The shadow also changes the quality of light, making distant objects appear clearer and more defined. Then the cloud moves on, sunlight returns, and familiar warmth spreads across his shoulders once more. These brief variations in light and temperature provide a kind of rhythm to the day, natural punctuation marks that help divide the long hours into manageable segments. Marcus has learned to appreciate such small changes, finding in them a source of interest that makes his duty more bearable. His replacement is still hours away, though the concept of time moves strangely on the wall, sometimes crawling with agonizing slowness, sometimes seeming to skip forward in unexpected jumps. The changing of the guard represents the closest thing to excitement that most days provide. A few words of ritual exchange, followed by the blessed relief of stepping down from his position and walking away, however temporarily. A lizard darts across the top of the wall, moving with quick, jerky motions before freezing completely for several seconds, then resuming its rapid progress toward some unknown destination. Its sudden appearance and equally sudden disappearance provide a brief moment of surprise in an otherwise predictable environment. Marcus wonders where it came from and where it's going. What urgent lizard business requires such haste? The creature's ability to move so quickly after perfect stillness reminds Marcus of his own enforced immobility, the way duty requires him to remain motionless while life continues its constant activity all around him. Birds fly overhead, insects crawl and buzz, plants grow and sway in the breeze, but Marcus must remain as fixed as the stones beneath his feet. A distant rumble of thunder draws his attention to the western horizon, where dark clouds are beginning to gather above the hills. The sound is faint but unmistakable, promising rain before evening arrives. Marcus hopes the storm will hold off until after his shift ends, though he's prepared to endure whatever weather the day brings. Guard duty continues regardless of conditions, and he stood watch through everything from blazing heat to driving snow. The approaching storm adds a new element to his vigil, something to monitor and consider as the afternoon progresses. Weather can change quickly in this region, and what begins as distant thunder can develop into serious conditions within hours. But for now, the clouds remain far away, and the immediate forecast calls for nothing more threatening than the possibility of cooling rain. A bee drones past, heavy with pollen from whatever flowers it's been visiting in the valley below. The sound of its wings creates a brief interruption in the pervasive silence, then fades as the insect continues its purposeful journey back to hive or nest. Marcus wonders if the bee follows the same route every day, visiting the same flowers in the same order, or if it varies its pattern according to some complex calculation of efficiency and opportunity. The thought reminds him of his own routine, the way his duties follow predictable patterns day after day, season after season. But where the bee's work produces honey and supports its community in tangible ways, Marcus's labor yields only the absence of events, the negative space where trouble might have occurred but didn't. It's harder to take satisfaction in such achievements, though he's learned to find meaning in the quiet maintenance of peace. His spear has grown warm in his grip, heated by the afternoon sun and the constant contact with his palm. The metal point catches and reflects light, creating small, bright flashes that dance across the stone at his feet. Marcus has polished that point countless times, keeping it sharp and clean according to regulations, though it's never been used for anything more threatening than dispatching the occasional snake. A wasp investigates the leather wrappings on his spear shaft, perhaps drawn by the scent of the oil used to preserve the material. It crawls across the surface with methodical thoroughness, antennae testing for whatever chemical signatures guide its search. Marcus remains perfectly still, allowing the insect to complete its examination without interference. After a few moments, the wasp apparently concludes that his equipment holds no interest and flies away toward more promising territory. The afternoon heat has reached its peak now. Pressing down on the wall with almost physical weight, Marcus can feel sweat trickling down his back beneath his tunic, but he makes no move to wipe it away or adjust his clothing. Such actions would be undisciplined, a break in the perfect composure that military training has made automatic. He simply endures the discomfort, adding it to the catalog of minor irritations that comprise his daily existence. A dragonfly hovers near the wall, its iridescent wings beating so rapidly they become invisible blurs. The creature darts back and forth with mechanical precision, hunting insects too small for Marcus to see, but apparently abundant enough to sustain its aerial campaign. There's something almost military about the dragonfly's movements, the way it patrols its territory with systematic efficiency. The insect's success at its chosen task provides a stark contrast to Marcus's own situation, where success is measured by the absence of activity rather than its presence. The dragonfly catches prey, feeds itself, accomplishes visible goals throughout its hunting flight. Marcus stands still and hopes nothing happens, celebrating victories that no one else can see or measure. A gentle breeze carries the scent of wood smoke from the settlement behind the wall, probably cook fires being prepared for the evening meal. The smell reminds Marcus that his own dinner is still hours away, though his stomach has begun the familiar process of anticipating food with increasing insistence. Military rations may be uninspiring, but they represent one of the few pleasures available during a guard's long day. The wind also brings other scents: horses from the stables, bread from the ovens, the green smell of growing things from gardens tended by civilians who live under the wall's protection. These fragrances create a kind of olfactory map of the settlement, reminding Marcus of the community that depends on his vigilance even when he cannot see or interact with its inhabitants. A spider descends on a single strand of silk from somewhere above, probably the wooden framework that supports the wall's defensive structures. It dangles in the air for several seconds, rotating slowly as it tests conditions below, then either climbs back up or drops to the stone surface. Marcus loses track of it among the shadows and irregularities of the wall's construction. The spider's sudden appearance and equally sudden disappearance provide another small moment of interest in an otherwise unchanging environment. Marcus has learned to appreciate such brief encounters with the natural world, finding in them a source of contemplation that helps pass the long hours of duty. Each creature he observes is pursuing its own agenda, following instincts and imperatives as compelling as his own sense of duty. Thunder rumbles again from the western horizon, closer now and more distinct. The storm clouds have grown larger and darker, building into impressive towers that promise significant weather before evening arrives. Marcus watches their development with professional interest, noting wind patterns and the rate of approach. Weather awareness is part of a guard's training since conditions can affect visibility and the behavior of potential threats. But the storm is still distant enough that immediate concern isn't necessary. For now, it simply adds another element to monitor, another variable in the complex equation of factors that comprise his watch. Rain might actually be welcome, bringing relief from the afternoon heat and the dust that accumulates on everything exposed to the constant gentle breeze. A mouse darts across the top of the wall, moving with quick, nervous energy before disappearing into a gap between stones. Its sudden appearance startles Marcus slightly, the first genuine surprise he's experienced all day. The creature's presence suggests that the wall's construction provides habitat for various small animals, probably sustained by food scraps and the insects that thrive near human habitation. The mouse's ability to appear and vanish so quickly reminds Marcus of his own desire for mobility, for the freedom to move when and where he chooses, rather than remaining fixed in position by duty and discipline. But mice don't protect empires or serve causes larger than immediate survival. They have freedom of movement but no higher purpose, no sense of service or the satisfaction that comes from work well done. A hawk circles high overhead, riding thermal currents with effortless grace. Marcus has been watching this same hawk, or others like it, for months now, learning its patterns and preferences. The bird hunts in the morning when small animals are active, rests during the heat of midday, then makes another hunting flight as evening approaches and temperatures begin to cool. The hawk's schedule is more predictable than most soldiers, its behavior governed by instincts refined over thousands of generations. There's something admirable about such consistency. The way the bird follows natural rhythms without need for orders or supervision. It knows what it should be doing and does it with remarkable efficiency, achieving visible results that justify its existence. Marcus shifts his weight slightly, a tiny adjustment that helps prevent the stiffness that comes from maintaining the same position for hours. The movement is so subtle that a casual observer might miss it entirely, but it provides crucial relief for muscles and joints that have begun to protest their static condition. He's learned to make these micro adjustments throughout the day, small accommodations that allow his body to endure the demands of guard duty. A butterfly lands on his spear shaft, delicate wings opening and closing slowly as it rests in the afternoon sun. The creature shows no fear of the weapon or its bearer, apparently recognizing that this particular human poses no immediate threat. Marcus remains perfectly still, allowing the butterfly to use his equipment as a temporary perch while it gathers strength for whatever journey lies ahead. The insect's trust seems almost touching. This willingness to rest on the very tool that represents Marcus's readiness for violence. But perhaps the butterfly understands something about the nature of deterrence, the way the mere presence of weapons can prevent the need to use them, or perhaps it simply recognizes that threats and defenses exist in different realms entirely. After several minutes, the butterfly lifts away and disappears over the wall, carrying its splash of color into the neutral territory beyond Roman control. Marcus watches it go, wondering if it will find whatever it seeks in that unknown landscape, whether the world beyond the wall offers the same opportunities and dangers as the world within it. The afternoon continues its slow progression toward evening, measured not in dramatic events, but in the subtle accumulation of small moments, tiny observations, and the steady passage of shadows across stone. This is Marcus's life, and while it may appear unremarkable to outside observers, it contains its own quiet dignity and purpose. He protects an empire by standing still, serves Rome by doing nothing, contributes to civilization through the simple act of remaining alert and ready. It's not glorious work, but it's necessary work. The kind of steady, reliable service that allows more dramatic achievements to unfold elsewhere. Someone has to watch the walls, and today, that someone is Marcus. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western hills, and another day of guard duty moves steadily toward its conclusion. The shadows lengthen across the stone as afternoon surrenders to evening, and Marcus feels the familiar shift in temperature that signals the day's slow turn toward night. His replacement is still 2 hours away, but already his body has begun the subtle internal preparations for the end of his watch. Not relaxation exactly, but a different kind of alertness, the awareness that comes with knowing relief approaches, however gradually. A cricket begins its evening song somewhere among the stones at the base of the wall, a rhythmic chirping that will continue through the night. Soon others will join it, creating the gentle chorus that marks the transition from day to night in this quiet corner of the empire. Marcus finds the sound oddly comforting, a natural timepiece more reliable than any mechanical device. The western sky has begun to take on the golden quality that precedes sunset, though the sun itself remains well above the horizon. The light changes slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifting from the harsh white of midday to the warmer tones that will eventually deepen into the reds and purples of dusk. Marcus has watched this transformation thousands of times, and it never fails to mark the passage of his day with quiet precision. A barn owl calls from somewhere in the valley below, its haunting voice carrying clearly in the still air. The sound reminds Marcus that other creatures maintain their own watches through the hours of darkness, hunting and patrolling according to instincts as ancient as the stones beneath his feet. He wonders if the owl finds its nocturnal duties as monotonous as he finds his daylight vigil, or if the darkness brings enough variety to make each night feel different from the last. His stomach announces the approach of the evening meal with a low rumble that seems to echo off the walls around him. The sound is embarrassingly loud in the silence, but there's no one close enough to hear it except perhaps the cricket, which continues its steady rhythm without interruption. Marcus has learned to time his body's demands with military precision. his hunger arriving exactly when regulations dictate it should. A bat flickers overhead, its erratic flight pattern almost too quick to follow as it pursues insects in the cooling air. The creature appears and disappears like a dark thought, there one moment and gone the next, navigating by senses that Marcus can barely comprehend. Its ability to hunt in near darkness seems almost magical, though he knows it's simply another adaptation to the eternal struggle for survival that drives all living things. The approaching storm clouds have grown more impressive, building into towering formations that catch and reflect the changing light. Thunder rumbles again, closer now, promising rain before the night watch begins. Marcus hopes the weather will hold off until after the changing of the guard, though he's prepared to endure whatever conditions the evening brings. A wet night on the wall is miserable, but it's still just another night, and morning always comes eventually. A moth bumps against the stone near his left shoulder, drawn perhaps by some scent or texture that appeals to its mysterious sensibilities. It flutters around the area for several minutes, investigating cracks and crevices with the methodical thoroughness of a tiny explorer. Marcus watches its progress without moving, finding in its persistent search a kind of dedication that mirrors his own commitment to duty. The creature eventually loses interest and disappears into the gathering dusk, leaving Marcus alone once more with his thoughts and his watch. The brief encounter reminds him that even the smallest creatures pursue their own purposes with remarkable determination, following imperatives as compelling as any military order. There's something humbling about sharing the wall with such focused little lives. His feet have progressed beyond pain into a state of disconnection that makes him feel as though he's floating slightly above the ground. The sensation is both disturbing and oddly liberating, reducing his awareness of physical discomfort while simultaneously making him feel less anchored to the earth. He's learned to trust his balance even when sensation fails, relying on muscle memory developed through countless hours of practice. A gentle breeze stirs the evening air, carrying new scents from the valley below. The smell of cooking fires grows stronger as the settlement prepares its evening meals, and Marcus can detect the aroma of bread and roasted meat that reminds him of home and family and all the simple pleasures that exist beyond the wall. His own dinner will be considerably less appetizing, but food is food, and hunger makes even military rations tolerable. The cricket's song is joined by another, then another, until a small chorus begins to build among the stones. The sound creates a gentle backdrop to the evening's progression, a natural soundtrack that will continue through the night hours when different guards take their positions and maintain their own vigilant watches. There's something eternal about the sound, as if crickets have been singing in this place since long before Romans arrived and will continue long after they're gone. A spider emerges from a crack in the mortar, probably encouraged by the cooling temperature to venture from its daytime hiding place. It moves with careful deliberation across the stone surface, testing each step before committing its weight. Marcus admires the creature's cautious approach to navigation, its willingness to move slowly rather than risk a dangerous fall into the gaps between blocks. The spider pauses near a small accumulation of debris, perhaps investigating scents that indicate the presence of prey or simply resting before continuing its evening hunt. Its patience seems almost human in its deliberate calculation, this willingness to wait for the right moment rather than rushing toward uncertain outcomes. After several minutes, it resumes its journey and disappears around the curve of a stone, leaving only the memory of its careful progress. Thunder rumbles again from the western hills, accompanied now by the first flicker of lightning on the horizon. The storm is definitely approaching, though slowly enough that Marcus might complete his watch before the worst weather arrives. He stood guard through countless storms, and while rain makes everything more difficult, it also brings a kind of drama that breaks the usual monotony of wall duty. A firefly blinks in the gathering dusk, its brief flash of light appearing and disappearing like a tiny star falling to earth. Then another appears and another until small points of light begin to dance in the air around the wall. Marcus has always found fireflies somehow magical, these creatures that carry their own illumination through the darkness, signaling to each other in a language of light that no human fully understands. The sight reminds him that night brings its own beauty, even to a place as utilitarian as a military fortification. The darkness that makes his job more difficult also reveals wonders that remain hidden during the bright hours of day. Stars will soon appear, constellations that have guided travelers and marked seasons since before Rome was even imagined. The moon will rise, casting everything in silver light that transforms the familiar landscape into something mysterious and new. His replacement, Quintus, will arrive in perhaps an hour, though time moves strangely as day transitions to night. The changing of the guard follows a ritual as old as the army itself, formal words exchanged to ensure continuity of watch and transfer of responsibility. Marcus looks forward to that moment, not because his duty is unpleasant, but because stepping down from his position represents a small victory, another day successfully completed in service to the Empire. A mouse scurries across the top of the wall, moving with nervous energy before disappearing into a crevice between stones. Its sudden appearance and equally sudden vanishing provide a brief moment of surprise in the otherwise predictable progression of evening. The creature's presence suggests that the wall supports a complex ecosystem of small animals, all pursuing their own survival strategies in the spaces between human activities. The western sky continues its slow transformation, the golden light deepening toward orange as the sun approaches the hills. Clouds catch and hold the changing colors, creating a natural artwork that shifts and evolves with each passing minute. Marcus has watched countless sunsets from this position, and while they're all variations on the same theme, each one offers its own subtle differences in color and composition. A barn owl calls again from the valley, its voice now joined by the distant howl of a wolf somewhere in the hills beyond Roman territory. The sounds create a wild counterpoint to the domestic noises from the settlement behind the wall, reminding Marcus that civilization exists as a small island of order surrounded by vast expanses of untamed nature. His job is to maintain the boundary between these worlds, to stand ready at the place where safety meets the unknown. The approaching darkness brings its own challenges and comforts. Vision becomes more limited, requiring greater attention to sounds and other subtle cues that might indicate movement or threat. But the cooler air also brings relief from the day's heat, and the gentle sounds of evening create a peaceful atmosphere that makes the final hours of his watch almost pleasant. A beetle crawls across the stone near his right foot, its tiny legs clicking against the limestone with sounds so faint they might be imaginary. Marcus watches its progress without shifting his stance, following its path as it navigates around obstacles that must seem enormous from its perspective. The creature's determination in the face of such challenges seems almost heroic, this willingness to continue despite the vast scale of the world around it. His spear has grown heavy in his grip, the weight seeming to increase as fatigue accumulates throughout the day. But the weapon remains as familiar as his own arm, balanced and ready despite the hours of motionless duty. He's carried this particular spear through countless watches, and it's become more than just equipment. It's a companion, a tool, and a symbol of his readiness to defend what needs defending. The cricket chorus grows stronger as more insects join the evening song, creating a gentle wall of sound that will continue through the night hours. The rhythm is hypnotic in its consistency, a natural metronome that marks time in measures older than human civilization. Marcus finds the sound oddly comforting, a reminder that some things continue regardless of empires or armies or the small dramas of human ambition. A firefly lands on the stone parapet near his left hand, its body glowing with soft green light that pulses in regular intervals. The insect sits motionless for several seconds, as if gathering strength for its next burst of flight, then lifts away into the gathering darkness. Marcus follows its blinking progress until it disappears among the shadows, carrying its tiny beacon into the vast indifference of the night. The storm clouds continue their slow approach, building into impressive formations that promise significant weather before dawn. Lightning flickers more frequently now, still distant but clearly visible against the darkening sky. The electrical display adds drama to the evening's progression, though Marcus knows that storms observed from a distance are far more pleasant than storms endured while standing exposed on a wall. A second cricket begins its song near the first, then a third, until the evening air fills with their rhythmic chorus. The sound creates a peaceful backdrop to the night's arrival, a natural soundtrack that will continue long after Marcus has been relieved of his duties. There's something eternal about the cricket song, as if these insects understand secrets about time and patience that humans struggle to learn. The shadows lengthen and deepen as the sun continues its descent toward the western hills. Soon it will touch the horizon, beginning the final act of another unremarkable day in the long history of the wall. Marcus has witnessed this transition thousands of times, yet it never loses its quiet significance. Another day successfully guarded, another night approaching with its own duties and challenges. A moth spirals around an imaginary point in the air near the wall, following some invisible pattern that makes sense only to itself. Its flight seems random to human eyes, but Marcus has learned that most natural behaviors follow logic that becomes apparent only through patient observation. The moth knows where it's going, even if that destination remains mysterious to outside observers. His stomach reminds him again that the evening meal approaches, though military rations hardly qualify as something to anticipate with pleasure. Still, food represents one of the few punctuation marks in an otherwise continuous sentence of duty, a brief change in routine that helps divide the long hours into manageable segments. Even bad food tastes good when you're hungry enough. The western sky deepens from gold to orange, the light taking on the warm tones that precede the more dramatic colors of sunset. Clouds catch and hold the changing illumination, creating patterns that shift and evolve with the sun's movement. Marcus has learned to read these aerial displays like a book, using them to track time and predict weather with remarkable accuracy. A spider descends from somewhere above on a strand of silk so fine it's nearly invisible, rotating slowly as it tests conditions below before either climbing back up or dropping to the stone surface. The creature's sudden appearance reminds Marcus that the wall supports life in ways that aren't immediately obvious, providing habitat and hunting grounds for countless small creatures pursuing their own survival strategies. Thunder rolls across the valley, closer now and more insistent. The storm will likely arrive within the hour, bringing rain and wind and the particular challenges that come with maintaining watch in difficult weather. But storms also bring relief from heat and dust, and Marcus has learned to appreciate the way rain washes the air clean and makes everything smell fresh and new. A firefly blinks near the base of the wall, then another, until small points of light begin to dance in the gathering dusk like fallen stars. Their brief flashes create a gentle light show that will continue through the early evening hours, each insect pursuing its own mysterious agenda in the language of illumination. Marcus finds their presence oddly comforting. These creatures that carry their own light through the darkness. The cricket chorus grows stronger as the temperature drops and more insects emerge to join the evening song. The sound creates a peaceful wall of rhythm that will persist through the night, marking time in measures that predate human civilization. There's something hypnotic about their consistency, this natural metronome that continues regardless of human activities or concerns. His replacement should arrive soon, though Quintus has a tendency to appear exactly on time rather than early. The changing of the guard follows a ritual as formal as any religious ceremony. Words exchanged to ensure continuity of watch and proper transfer of responsibility. Marcus looks forward to that moment, not because his duty is particularly onerous, but because stepping down represents completion, another day successfully served. A barn owl calls from the valley below, its haunting voice carrying clearly in the still air. The sound reminds Marcus that other creatures maintain their own vigils through the hours of darkness, hunting and patrolling according to instincts as ancient as the stones beneath his feet. There's something comforting about sharing the night with such dedicated hunters, these fellow sentinels pursuing their own versions of watchful duty. The approaching darkness transforms the familiar landscape into something mysterious and new. Shadows deepen and merge, creating pools of blackness where danger might hide or imagination might run wild. But Marcus has learned to distinguish between real threats and the countless false alarms that darkness can generate, his trained eye sorting genuine movement from the tricks of light and shadow. A gentle breeze carries the scent of rain from the approaching storm, mixed with the familiar aromas of wood smoke and cooking food from the settlement behind the wall. The combination creates a complex olfactory landscape that tells the story of human habitation in a place where civilization meets the wild. Marcus breathes deeply, appreciating these small sensory pleasures that help make his duty more bearable. The sun touches the horizon now, beginning its final descent into night. The sky explodes into color, orange deepening to red and purple as the day's last light spreads across the western hills. It's a magnificent display, this daily reminder that even the most ordinary days can end with beauty and drama. Marcus watches the spectacle unfold, grateful for this brief moment of wonder in an otherwise utilitarian existence. A moth bumps against the warm stone near his shoulder, perhaps drawn by heat retained from the day's sunshine. It flutters around the area for several minutes, investigating textures and scents with the methodical persistence of a tiny explorer. Marcus appreciates the creature's dedication to its mysterious mission. This willingness to continue searching even when the object of that search remains unclear. Lightning flickers more frequently now in the approaching storm clouds, still distant but clearly visible against the darkening sky. The electrical display adds drama to the evening's progression, though Marcus knows that storms are far more pleasant to observe from a distance than to endure while standing exposed on a wall. Still, rain will bring relief from the dust and heat that accumulate during long summer days. The cricket song reaches full volume as the temperature drops and more insects join the evening chorus. Their rhythmic chirping creates a natural soundtrack that will continue through the night hours, marking time in measures older than Rome itself. There's something eternal about the sound, as if crickets understand secrets about patience and persistence that humans struggle to learn. His feet have progressed beyond numbness into a state of complete disconnection that makes walking feel like an abstract concept. The sensation is both liberating and slightly alarming, reducing physical discomfort while simultaneously making him feel unmoored from the earth. He's learned to trust balance and muscle memory when normal sensation fails, relying on thousands of hours of training to maintain his position. A firefly blinks directly in front of him, its green light pulsing in the gathering darkness like a tiny beacon. Then another appears, and another, until points of light begin to dance around the wall in patterns that seem almost choreographed. Marcus has always found fireflies somehow magical, these creatures that carry their own illumination through the night, signaling to each other in languages that no human fully comprehends. The western sky continues its transformation, colors deepening and spreading as the sun sinks lower toward the hills. Clouds catch and hold the changing light, creating natural artworks that shift and evolve with each passing moment. It's a beautiful display, this daily reminder that even the most routine days can conclude with wonder and spectacle. Thunder rumbles overhead, close enough now that Marcus can feel the vibration through the stone beneath his feet. The storm will arrive soon, bringing rain and wind and all the complications that come with maintaining watch in difficult weather. But he's stood guard through countless storms, and while rain makes everything more challenging, it also brings a kind of freshness that makes the night feel clean and new. A spider emerges from a crack in the mortar, encouraged perhaps by the cooling temperature to venture from its daytime hiding place. It moves with careful deliberation across the stone surface, each step planned and executed with precision. Marcus admires the creature's cautious approach to exploration, its willingness to move slowly rather than risk dangerous mistakes. The approaching night brings its own rhythm and character, different from the steady persistence of daylight hours. Sounds become more important as vision diminishes, and Marcus's ears attune themselves to the subtle audio landscape of evening. Cricket songs, distant thunder, the rustle of wind through grass, the occasional call of nocturnal birds beginning their own hunts and patrols. A moth spirals through the air near the wall, following invisible currents and mysterious imperatives that guide its erratic flight. The creature's movements seem random to human observation, but Marcus has learned that most natural behaviors follow logic that becomes apparent only through patient watching. The moth knows its destination, even if that knowledge remains hidden from outside observers. His replacement will arrive soon, bringing the formal words and ritual exchanges that mark the end of another watch. Quintus is reliable, if not particularly punctual, appearing exactly when duty requires, rather than a moment sooner. The changing of the guard represents more than just a transfer of responsibility. It's a small ceremony that connects Marcus to the long tradition of men who have stood watch on walls throughout the empire's history. The sun disappears behind the western hills, leaving only the afterglow of sunset painted across the sky. Stars begin to appear in the deepening darkness, first one, then several, then countless points of light that will guide travelers and mark seasons through the night hours. The familiar constellations remind Marcus that some things remain constant even as empires rise and fall. A barn owl calls from somewhere in the valley, its voice now joined by the distant howl of a wolf in the hills beyond Roman territory. The sounds create a wild counterpoint to the domestic noises from the settlement, reminding Marcus that civilization exists as a small island of order surrounded by vast expanses of untamed nature. His duty is to guard the boundary between these worlds. The cricket chorus reaches its full evening strength, creating a wall of gentle sound that will persist through the night. Their rhythmic chirping marks time in measures that predate human civilization. A natural metronome that continues regardless of armies or empires or the small dramas of human ambition. Marcus finds their consistency oddly comforting, this reminder that some rhythms endure beyond the reach of politics or war. Lightning illuminates the approaching storm clouds, revealing towering formations that promise significant weather before dawn. The electrical display creates natural theater against the darkening sky, beautiful to observe from a distance, but potentially dangerous for anyone standing exposed on a wall. Marcus hopes the worst of the storm will hold off until after his relief arrives. A firefly lands on his spear shaft, its body pulsing with soft green light in regular intervals. The insect sits motionless for several seconds, as if gathering strength for its next flight, then lifts away into the darkness. Marcus follows its blinking progress until it disappears among the shadows, carrying its tiny beacon into the vast indifference of the night. The evening meal should arrive soon, carried by whatever soldier has been assigned to make the rounds to all guard positions. The food will be as uninspiring as always, but it represents one of the few changes in routine that help mark the passage of time during long watches. Even bad food tastes acceptable when hunger has built to sufficient levels. A gentle breeze carries new scents from the valley below. The smell of rain mixing with wood smoke and cooking fires from the settlement. The combination creates a complex, aromatic landscape that tells the story of human habitation in a place where order meets chaos, where civilization maintains its precarious foothold against the surrounding wilderness. His watch nears its end now, another day of duty drawing toward completion with the same quiet satisfaction that marks all successful service. Marcus has stood ready for events that never came, maintained vigilance against threats that never materialized, contributed to the Empire's security through the simple act of remaining alert and prepared. It's not glorious work, but it's necessary work, and he takes quiet pride in its completion. The stars emerge more clearly as full darkness approaches, familiar patterns that have guided human activities since long before Rome existed. Their steady light provides comfort and orientation, reminding Marcus that some things remain constant even as everything else changes. Tonight, as every night, the stars will keep their own vigil over the world below. Thunder rolls across the valley, bringing the promise of rain and the particular challenges that come with maintaining watch in stormy weather. But Marcus has endured countless nights of wind and rain, and morning always comes eventually, bringing relief and the satisfaction of duty completed despite difficult conditions. A cricket begins its song directly below his position, soon joined by others until the evening chorus reaches full strength. Their rhythmic chirping creates a peaceful soundtrack that will continue through the night hours, marking time in measures older than human memory. There's something eternal about their consistency, this natural rhythm that persists regardless of human concerns. The western sky fades from red to purple to deep blue as the last light of day disappears behind the hills. Night settles over the wall like a familiar blanket, bringing its own duties and challenges, but also its own quiet beauty. Soon Quintus will arrive to begin his own watch, and Marcus will step down from his position, another day of service successfully completed. A firefly blinks in the gathering darkness, then another until small points of light begin to dance around the wall like fallen stars. Their gentle illumination creates a natural light show that will continue through the early evening, each insect pursuing its own mysterious agenda in the ancient language of bioluminescence. The approaching storm announces itself with another rumble of thunder, closer now and more insistent. Rain will arrive before midnight, bringing challenges and complications, but also the fresh scent of washed air and the gentle sound of water against stone. Marcus has learned to appreciate storms, even when duty requires him to stand exposed to their fury. His replacement appears around the curve of the wall, right on schedule despite Quintus's reputation for precise rather than early arrival. The familiar ritual of changing guard begins with traditional words and formal gestures, ensuring continuity of watch and proper transfer of responsibility. Another day ends, another night begins, and the wall remains secure under Roman protection. Marcus steps down from his position for the first time in 12 hours, feeling the strange sensation of movement after such prolonged stillness. His relief spreads through tired muscles as he walks away from the wall, knowing that tomorrow will bring another watch, another day of patient vigilance in service to an empire that depends on such quiet dedication. The cricket song follows him as he makes his way toward the settlement, their rhythmic chorus a gentle farewell to another day of duty successfully completed. Behind him, Quintus takes his position, beginning his own long watch under the emerging stars. The wall remains guarded, the empire remains secure, and life continues its ancient rhythm of service and rest, duty and relief, day and night. And so Marcus disappears into the gentle darkness of evening, his footsteps fading along the worn path that countless guards have walked before him. Tomorrow, when the sun rises pale and distant over the same familiar hills, he'll return to this exact spot. He'll take his position against the same stones, grip the same spear, scan the same empty horizon. The seasons will turn, as they always do. Autumn will deepen into winter, bringing cold that seeps through wool and leather, frost that makes the stones treacherous underfoot, winds that cut through even the heaviest cloaks. Marcus will stand through it all, watching his breath form clouds in the frigid air, counting the hours by the gradual warming of sunlight on stone. Spring will return eventually, as it always does, bringing the first green shoots through melting snow, the return of birds to their familiar territories, the gradual lengthening of days that makes each watch slightly more bearable. Summer will follow with its own challenges, heat that radiates from stone, sweat that stings the eyes, the endless buzz of insects drawn to any source of moisture. And through it all, Marcus will stand, day after day, season after season, year after year. His hair will gray at the temples, his back will develop a permanent ache, his eyes will grow distant with the particular fatigue that comes from watching empty landscapes for decades. New guards will arrive, young men fresh from training who think they understand what wall duty means. Marcus will watch them learn as he learned that the real enemy isn't invasion or siege or dramatic assault. The real enemy is time itself, the slow, relentless passage of hours that must be endured one by one, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat. The endless repetition of small movements, tiny adjustments, the constant battle against boredom and fatigue, and the human need for change, for excitement, for something, anything to happen. Other guards will come and go, some will transfer to more active postings, seeking the kind of military service that offers adventure and the possibility of advancement. Others will simply disappear one day, their names added to the lists of men who couldn't endure the particular kind of warfare that wall duty represents. A few will die at their posts, victims of age or illness or simple exhaustion, found slumped against the stones they spent their lives protecting. But the wall will remain, stone by stone, block by block, mile after mile of carefully fitted limestone that has stood for decades and will stand for decades more. New guards will learn its contours, its weak spots, its particular sounds in different weather. They'll develop their own systems for managing time, their own ways of finding interest in the endless sameness of their duty. The empire will continue its vast, slow business of expansion and administration, trade and taxation, the countless daily activities that keep civilization functioning. Merchants will travel the roads behind the wall, carrying goods and news and the small luxuries that make life bearable. Farmers will tend their fields, knowing that armed men stand ready to protect their crops from raiders who almost never come. Cities will grow and prosper in the safety that walls and guards provide, their citizens pursuing the arts and sciences and commerce that flourish only where peace is maintained, through the quiet dedication of men willing to stand watch. Most will never think about the guards, never consider the cost of their security, never wonder about the men who spend their lives staring at empty horizons, so that others might sleep safely in warm beds. And that's as it should be. The highest praise a wall guard can receive is to be forgotten, to perform his duty so effectively that his service becomes invisible. Success for men like Marcus is measured in the absence of events, in the peaceful continuation of ordinary life, in the quiet maintenance of boundaries that exist more in the mind than in the landscape. Somewhere along the wall tonight, another guard takes his position. Perhaps it's young Flavius, who still believes that something dramatic might happen during his watch. Perhaps it's old Servius, who has learned to find contentment in the rhythm of duty, the satisfaction of work that may be tedious but is never meaningless. Whoever it is, he stands now in the darkness, spear in hand, eyes scanning the familiar emptiness ahead. Behind him, the settlement sleeps under the protection his vigilance provides. Before him stretches the same landscape that Marcus knows by heart, the same hills and streams and distant forests that have witnessed countless watches by countless guards throughout the years. The cricket song continues, as it always does, marking time in measures older than Rome itself. Stars emerge in their familiar patterns, providing the same guidance and comfort they offered to guards who stood on this wall when it was newly built, and will offer to guards who may stand here long after the empire itself has passed into memory. Thunder still rumbles in the distance, but the storm has moved off toward other territories, carrying its drama and complication away from this quiet sector of the frontier. Rain may come later, or it may not. The guard will stand regardless, enduring whatever weather the night brings, adding his own small contribution to the great work of watching and waiting that defines his service. The wall stretches away into darkness in both directions, an endless line of stone and duty that connects this position to hundreds of others just like it. At each one, a man stands ready, maintaining his own vigil, contributing his own thread to the vast tapestry of defense that protects the empire's borders. They're connected by shared purpose and common duty, but separated by the essential solitude that defines their work. And tomorrow, when the sun rises once again over the familiar hills, Marcus will return. He'll take his position, grip his spear, begin another day of the same patient watching that has defined his adult life. The landscape will look exactly as it did yesterday, and the day before, and every day for the past 3 years. But he'll be ready, ready for movement that never comes, prepared for threats that rarely materialize, alert for changes in the pattern of sameness that might signal something worth reporting. His reward will be another day of nothing happening, another night of peaceful sleep for the people he protects, another small victory in the quiet war against chaos and uncertainty. The guard duty continues, passed from shift to shift like a sacred trust, each man adding his own contribution to the endless work of standing ready. It's not glorious service, but it's necessary service, the kind of steady, reliable dedication that allows empires to endure and civilizations to flourish. And in the morning, the sun will rise again over the same quiet hills, and someone will be there to greet it, spear in hand, eyes alert, ready for another day of watching over the edge of the world. The wall will stand, the guard will watch, and life will continue its ancient rhythm of duty and rest, vigilance and peace, service and sleep. The stones remember every guard who has stood upon them, though their names may be forgotten and their stories lost to time. In the end, perhaps that's legacy enough. To have served faithfully, to have stood ready when standing ready mattered, to have contributed to something larger than oneself through the simple act of remaining alert and prepared. The cricket song fades into the gentle darkness of evening, and somewhere along the wall, a guard settles into his watch, beginning another long night of patient vigilance in service to an empire that depends on such quiet dedication. Tomorrow will bring another day, another watch, another opportunity to serve, and that, for men like Marcus, is enough. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as the nights these forgotten guardians help to protect.